Thanks everybody for coming back from lunch. I'm excited to engage in this discussion on thinking about purpose and how it connects to career and workforce development. We're really fortunate to have an expert in this field in our midst. So I would love, Tony, if you would start by maybe grounding us a little bit in when we talk about purpose or sense of purpose, to help us understand what that means.
Sure. So the easy questions right after lunch, I can start with that. What is purpose? I am so honored to be here. I'm grateful for the venue that's been created and for the honor and fairness to even grapple with defining a concept like purpose in life, and that we can create space for this conversation here. I think of purpose as a self-organizing life aim. It can certainly be more than that. Those of us in this room might add a few words left and right of that definition, but a self-organizing life aim is sort of a center of gravity way of thinking about what purpose is. Self-organizing in that it takes a lot of different aspects of who we are and puts them together, our identities, our motivations, our values, right? And says that we can weave a tether around those things and direct that towards some aim, some intention that we have for ourselves. So we think of it as bigger, larger than maybe a goal. That's something I could accomplish. I can finish this task, right? Purpose is sort of saying, well, once I accomplish that goal, what is the goal that I'm going to pursue next? So it's organizing who I am and all the things that comprise who I am and directing it towards something in the world. I would like to add, though, is sort of foreground this conversation around purpose with that I think oftentimes we sort of jump to a version or an aspect of purpose that is about its what. We almost start with questions about what is your purpose, and without really thinking about the overwhelming sort of nature of that. And I would encourage us to at least open space for thinking about purpose as much or more about when. Like, when do we feel purposeful? It really opens the idea of sense of purpose. Purpose as an affective experience, and being thoughtful about when in our everyday lives we sense that. And when we do that, it doesn't seem so heavy. Like, do I have a purpose and can I articulate it when put on the spot? But more questions about when do I feel this sense, even if it's fleeting, right? Even if the way I felt this morning isn't necessarily how I feel right now or this evening, but I am a person capable of feeling purposeful from time to time. And then really thinking about the real value of that. As it turns out, there is a rich and growing research literature that shows that when people feel purposeful, boy, does the world open up in terms of physical health, psychological health, social connections, kind of the things that we would want most for ourselves and other people really sort of tag along with feeling a sense of purpose. Even for those of us who really struggle sometimes to articulate what it is, the privilege is in feeling purposeful whenever we can feel it. And so I'll start with that sort of grounding.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony. I think that's a really good anchor for the conversation, and to try and now to connect this into thinking about workforce and career development. And throughout the morning, I've heard purpose pop up a few times. In the last session before lunch, there was a focus on really lovely examples of meaningful work, where you might think about meaningful work as connected to purpose. And then earlier this morning, when Lisa Lawson got started, there was also conversation about meeting basic needs. And for some of us, work is about meeting basic needs. So I kind of want to bring some of the complexity into the conversation too, when we're trying to make connections between purpose and workforce and career readiness. And I'd love to now turn it over to Erica to get us started a little bit on where purpose kind of shows up in the work that you're doing with older adolescents and young adults. Where it feels most relevant, or where, it doesn't necessarily sort of fit in the way that we might think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to, I think, start with the conversation that we started this morning around basic needs, because I think for many of the young people that we work with in workforce and education programs and communities, that organizing principle, if that's the sort of way we're going to define purpose, actually has everything to do with basic needs in the moment when you start engaging with them. Their purpose is to, that day, the next day, get their basic needs met. And I think that, so for many of us who do work in this space, that is one of the places where purpose shows up. I think for most of us doing work in this space, our goal, our hope, is that we can help a young person have other experiences of purpose that allow them to grow and develop. And I think one of the things that I really appreciate your sort of, it's not what is your purpose. I mean, quite frankly, imagine sitting in front of a 19-year-old who's come in and you're like, well, let's just start. What's your purpose, right? Like, I'm walking out the door. That's my purpose. But the when, and I think within workforce and education programs, we have a lot of opportunities to create moments that feel purposeful. And so I think that's one of the very powerful and important places that it shows up. And it really speaks to the importance of things like career-connected learning, the importance of project-based learning, and doing work collectively with others in a community, because that tends to be the kind of environment that gives a young person that feeling of like, hey, I feel purposeful. They might not use those words in that moment, but that feeling of sort of connection, of productivity, of contributing in some way. And I think the hope is that if you stitch enough of those together, they begin to form some sort of coherent narrative for the self, for the young person, where they say, I really feel purposeful, and attracted to the idea of, working, one-on-one with people and helping them in a healthcare or social setting, or, I really feel purposeful when I build something and I can walk down the street and say, I built the basement of that 8-story building, right? And so I think that the power of workforce development and education is less about trying to get a young person to like define their purpose, but to try to give them as many different kinds of experiences where they can feel that sense of purpose and build their own journey, build their own narrative. I think again, not forgetting that basic needs piece, that there's often a pretty significant amount of time and work that has to go into making sure that someone who walks in the door, who has a purpose of getting their basic needs met, that person is able to get beyond that, is able to kind of move into these more transformative experiences.
Thank you. Kate, I'm going to pass it on to you to reflect on that same topic.
Yeah, so one of the best things about working at Europe United is that in addition to my regular day job, where I spend a lot of time with spreadsheets, I also get to serve as a coach for young people. And so, like any good last-minute preparer, yesterday afternoon, I met with my interns and I said, hey, I have to talk about purpose tomorrow. Let's talk about it. And I want to anchor us in something that a student actually shared written after the coaching session. Because I think it's very powerful actually to this dichotomy of sort of how do you meet your basic needs and find your purpose. So she says, I grew up in survival mode, so my why isn't about ambition or career goals or finding my passion. My why is about breaking the cycle. I'm doing this to become the version of myself I've always wanted to be, but was too scared to try. And I think it's just such a good reflection of some of the skills we try to build in our young people through the program. So, I think one of the things we do, we build a lot of community and we have a lot of reflection time around what is your why. So to add another W to our when and why and where. And so that's a really important part of the program. We do a lot of sort of durable skills to let them bring their purpose to life. But I think the third thing that I'd just like to touch on is we give them a 6-month internship, typically with a corporate partner. And I also ask them about, they're in their internship phase, their day-to-day going to an employer, experiencing what it's like to be in sort of the white-collar workforce, many of them for the first time. And I asked them yesterday, what has maybe changed about your why since you started this program? Because at the beginning of the program, we heard a lot about, I want to pay my bills. I want to, let my mom retire. I want to go on vacation. And almost to a person yesterday, the thing that got shared about what's changed about their why is their ability to contribute to their team and to do meaningful work in the workplace. And many of them had accepted internships that they were not particularly excited about. On paper, they were like, okay. And yet they are almost all thriving because they are being given really meaningful work. And they feel like they are doing something to further the purpose of their team, whether it's, a manager who's really invested in them or, a mentor they have found on site, or whether it's just coming back to the community space as interns, they have been able to both do things that they find useful and feel like they're making a contribution to a team, and also have the space to reflect on that. So I thought it was very interesting to sort of watch that evolve over time from this sort of basic needs lens into, and it almost didn't matter the kind of work they were doing. Like some of them are doing very like maybe one step up from note taking, right? But they still really felt meaningful at work, and I think that really speaks to the power of the work-based learning experience as a really core part of helping young people understand that any kind of work can be meaningful if you find the right people.
Thank you, Kate. Walter, that's actually a good segue because I'd love for you to share a little bit about, as a former participant in Europe and now as somebody who heads up an alumni chapter, how has your sense of purpose sort of changed? What was it like for you when you started Europe? And, if you were reflecting on the same, like how has your why changed?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me, and thank you guys for sharing the space with me today. As an alumni, there's definitely a pattern here going on because when I first started, my why was survival. My back was against the wall. I didn't know where to start, where to go. I just knew that I had potential, I had the skills. When I'm around certain group of people, they really embrace me, but I couldn't find a way to break through to grow out of the retail environment, to grow out of having a job that I just felt like I was just clocking in, clocking out. And then when I got home, I just felt tired and felt like I wasn't really contributing to anything. When I started with Europe, it felt as if I'm taking a leap of faith. And I honestly thought the program was not even real when I first saw it, because I'm like, there's things like this that exist that actually are helping young adults. I'm like, this is too good to be true. I found about the opportunity due to being on Twitter. The algorithms reached me, and I was lucky enough to see that someone who I've never met before shared their experience about the program and how they were able to climb amongst the corporate world and where they're at today. And I was looking up to him like, hey, you work at this place, that's awesome. But he shared his core of how he started, and it all went back to this program and this opportunity. So, I took the leap of faith, and my why was I wanted survival. I wanted to be around my sick mother who was here in California. And if I didn't find an opportunity, I was gonna have to go back to Arkansas, where I'm from. And I knew that there I lacked a lot of opportunities. There wasn't anything there besides crime and things that would eventually lead me off of what I really wanted to do, which was be someone that can be a leader, someone that can go help others, someone that can provide meaningful impact to technology, to fashion, to arts, which is the things that I love doing. So looking back, it definitely was survival, but I always had a passion of figuring out how to get out of survival mode. And I would have these conversations amongst my friends and peers. How do I get out of the survival mode? Because I know it's not healthy. It's taking a toll on my body. It's taking a toll on my anxiety. It's taking a toll on the energy that I have to go out and do things or put myself in situations. And when I went through the program, the first thing that I was truly exposed to was a sense of community and a sense of people that are willing to say, hey, here's a mirror, and we're going to do the ugly work that no one wants to talk about, but we're going to do it, and we're going to get you prepared because we see your potential. We see your opportunity here. And we just need you to buy into the program. We need you to really believe that what you're doing is meaningful, that you have a purpose. And it goes back to the first day of stating my whys. And for me, it was, I want to find somewhere where I don't have to be in survival mode anymore. Even though I'm starting off because of survival, that's my intentions. And ultimately, I was, on the first week, I was told that I would not be matched with the provider who I was partnered with. So imagine the first week you're being told, hey, welcome to the program, but what we told you no longer applies. You no longer have a partner who has this internship opportunity. But honestly, that motivated me more to keep showing up, because I knew that if I continue to show up and I continue to show others who also was going through a similar scenario, I could maybe inspire them to keep showing up. So every day I would show up to the program knowing that I had no opportunity, that I was eventually not matched. Everyone else was matched and I wasn't. But I was like, I'm going to show up better every single day. And that led to me winning a leadership award in my cohort. It also led to me getting matched on the last day of the program with an internship opportunity at a company called BuzzFeed, who opened the door and opened opportunity to be able to be an intern. And from there, the rest is history. That was the moment where having that door open truly changed the way that I saw everything, So once I got to BuzzFeed, I had the internship opportunity. and I was there for 3 years. I was able to translate those values, translate what I learned from the program, and also translate the trump of like being told no and still showing up, you know? And it's led to today where I'm not in the survival mode anymore. And I have a car now and I have a place to stay at. And when I first started, my commute was over 2 hours to get to Hollywood to work. And it was a very miserable commute every single day. And I went through a lot of different things, especially it was during the middle of COVID. So as you guys can imagine, it was the Wild Wild West in the commute world. So, but having that experience now, I'm able to align and inspire others, newcomers, and be able to say, hey, this is what I went through and this is how I was able to go through it. And even when you don't have the opportunity in front of you, showing up for yourself and showing up that because you seek to be better does lead you to a better why every single time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Thanks so much.
sure.
So much for sharing that. Yeah. For sure. Before we move on to another question that I have on the list, I wonder if Kate or Erica, if we could bring it back to some of the practices in your organization that help cultivate some of what we hear Walter experienced, or the young people that you were talking to about their why and how it's changed over time, like what that looks like when you're really kind of seeing the shifts and cultivating this sense of purpose among participants.
I can start and then I'll pass it back. So we've heard a lot about coaching and a lot about mentorship and a lot about community today, and those are all important things and deeply embedded in the Europe program. But I think the thing that we haven't talked as much about today is the role of the employer in creating these experiences. So throughout their internship, our employers are supported by folks on the Europe United team who check in regularly with the managers of the interns, have conversations about, you know, what feedback does your intern need to hear? How can we help you deliver that feedback? Do you want us to deliver it? Do you want to deliver it? They do regular performance reviews. And so I think there is something really important about helping employers also cultivate the skills to be giving these experiences to young people. And you know, many of our managers are also older adolescents. For many of them, it is their first time managing anybody, right? So you're 24, you're on the job, you're very excited, you've been given the opportunity to, you know, mentor a young person for the first time, and also your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, right? And so I think one of the powerful things about both sides of this, right, is we're both developing our young people and then also developing managers to be more inclusive, to give more meaningful work, to create a more inclusive, you know, feedback developmental space for young people to experience the workplace.
Yeah, no, I would certainly echo all of that. I think the couple things that I might add, which again have bubbled up a little bit in some conversation, but I think both policy and practice are very important in this space. So when I think about policy, I think about, you know, last month I was in Cleveland, and in Ohio, there recently have been some state policy changes that, I'm oversimplifying a complex set of policies, but that basically are incentivizing school districts to have more pre-apprenticeship programming available to students through their high schools in partnership with employers, which is a really big piece of it. I think about how here in California, we have recent legislation that's happened that is opening the door for more young people who are in our alternative and continuation high schools to participate in work-based learning experiences. And these are all those moments when, you know, because of these policies, you have these opportunities that, again, give more young people the chance to just do more things, to have more exposure to things where they can have those moments of purpose. So, you know, I think that there's the policy piece, then there's, of course, that practice piece, the operationalization on the ground. And I actually think we're very lucky in that we have no shortage of models, many of them evidence-based, that we can use to help young people have these experiences through career-connected learning, service learning, work-based learning, apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships. Like, we have the program components. We know what these things are. And so I think the challenge that we all face now is continuing to scale those, make sure that they reach diverse learners. I mean, this current young generation is the most diverse generation in America's history. We still have a lot of work to do to make these types of programs available to folks through both policy and then how we operationalize them on the ground. But I think that's, you know, that's a really key piece of it. The one other thing I will very quickly touch on which I think relates to the employer piece as well. You know, at JFF, we do a lot of work around job quality, really thinking about what it means to have a quality job. We know from a national survey we did last year that young workers are the least likely to be in a quality job. Just 29% of them are in a quality job. And I bring this up not to have like a depressing moment in the afternoon, but I think one of the things that I think about some these days is that we do have some structural elements in our labor market, our positions, our kind of how our employers are structuring positions that I think, you know, sometimes are working at cross purposes with helping young people develop a sense of purpose. And so I would like us to continue to think about how we can collaborate with employers to really strengthen job quality so that we don't have, for example, young workers are very likely to be in part-time positions where they're showing up, they want to work more, and they hear from their employers, well, I'm not going to schedule you more than 30 hours a week because then I have to give you health insurance. Like, you think about what that sounds like to a young person who's trying to develop their sense of purpose. They're doing the things, and yet we have some of these sort of system level challenges and employer practices that I think we can continue to work on so that young people really feel that sense of belonging and that they see that pathway forward.
Thank you. Tony, I want to bring it back to you because you sort of grounded us in this idea of sense of purpose. And as you're hearing from your co-panelists, are there kind of emergent questions that you think are good opportunities in moving forward as we're trying to understand the intersection and sort of the title of this panel, the role of purpose in career exploration and pathways that you are particularly excited about or feel like we need to invest in more?
Many, and I don't believe that I'm the only one who would be excited about this. I think one of the most interesting opportunities here is to realize this sort of creative moment we're in from a research standpoint, when we now know the value of feeling a sense of purpose for all kinds of life outcomes, but to actually learn directly from people who are experiencing and navigating this particular experience here of the transition to work and through work in different environments, to experience take a little bit. So we don't have to just throw darts at what kinds of things might cultivate purpose. We're hearing them named right here, but what I want to pull out just three that I think are particularly important. We call it the sort of the ARC framework, just to make things overly simplistic here, but ARC. So one set of experiences that we know seems to correlate strongly with experiencing purpose is agency. We've heard this a number of times today, but feeling in control of one's experiences. And so all kinds of conversations today, including the ones we just heard, is moments to actually make a decision, to be involved, agentically involved. This isn't already paved for you. You have to show up here and explain what's going to happen next. It's really difficult. It's really difficult for purpose to persist in the absence of agency. And so there's both a clue of how to cultivate purpose, but also how to extinguish it. If you don't like purpose, take away agency, right? That would be sort of a message there. Second, R, role. Having a role or role clarity. So here are some things you can do. Here's why it matters. Here's your contribution in this particular space. So experiences that afford a sense of role. I know who I am when I am here doing this work. If you don't like purpose, strip role clarity. There's nothing for you to do here. If you like purpose, let's be more thoughtful about what your role is here and how to align that with the other people, the teams, and the teamworks can be required here. And then finally, C, challenge, right? Sort of optimizing the right level of, there must be something to do here that I need to persist a little bit. It's not just laid out for me simply. I actually have to work at this a little bit, but it can't be overwhelmingly challenged or it's traumatic to an individual. So it's not about maximizing, but more about optimizing. For individuals, how do we tailor and curate experiences? And we're hearing a rich number of experiences like this today that afford the ARC experience. And we know a purposeful experience is sitting atop that ARC framework. People feel a sense of agency, role clarity, and challenge. And you can see that the pathways to work, and once a person has found work experiences, if you can keep that ARC framework alive, I think it gives us sort of those of us who think about purpose from a research standpoint, a wonderful way to study this by looking at when that ARC framework was there and when it's not there, how to maintain it. Sort of purpose isn't something just to achieve, but something to maintain over time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we will close there. Please join me in thanking our fantastic panel. Thank you so much.